So thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be here with you today. Just arrived from Montreal, so I will try to speak clearly. I will do a very short presentation today. So this talk is about public skepticism in the field of mental health and health education issues. My starting point is a well-known Canadian case study, the scandal caused by psychiatrist Ewan Cameron involved in MK Ultra program. Cameron was the first professor of psychiatry at McGill University, Montreal, in the 40s and the 60s. From a student of the highly influential psychiatrist Adolf Meyer, Cameron developed psychiatry in all directions, from pharmacology to social psychiatry and psychoanalysis. But he himself was more interested in biological psychiatry. Even before the CIA scandal broke, he was known among his colleagues for giving patients in his department too many electric shocks. After his death, it became public that he had been paid by the CIA, along with other North American doctors and psychologists, to use LSD, electroshock, and other biological treatments on patients in order to experiment on brainwashing and sensory deprivation. Here, the context of the Cold War is important to understand the CIA program. Cameron destroyed the lives of dozens of patients at the University Clinic with his experiments, expressing neither regret nor guilt, and neither did the members of his team. The scandal has been the subject of several books and films, journalist inquiries, and fiction. This is the last one published by two journalists in Montreal, a French-speaking and English-speaking one. It's not very good written, but the documentation is serious. It's documented. I follow this story for more than 10 years now, and I found this book many new documents, also serious work about the secondary literature. But there are also academic books and fiction about this story. It's not a new scoop. There are already books about that for 15 years now. The 4 books about the scandal have been published in the 70s. And if you have Netflix at home, you can watch series about Netflix, about these scandals. There are also new movies, there are documentaries, even well-known fiction, like this one, Stranger Things, very popular by teenagers. There are a lot of references to this program. So it's also now a part of the pop culture. Students and professors are still currently publishing academic works on this topic, including in Montreal historian Andrew Alton at McGill, yeah, thank you. And a very good paper has been recently published by a student, Jonathan Torbey, which I recommend reading this abstract, because maybe it's one of the best paper published on this story, and it's a student one. Andrew announced 10 years ago the publication of a book about this story. I don't know, it's still a project, but we will see. And so it's not only an affair of journalists and researchers. There are a lot of meetings of family association of victims, and now it's more the second or third generation of the families, but it's already actual case study. It's not only about the CIA and process against the CIA, it's also process against the Canadian state. So this kind of scandal raised public skepticism in the field of mental health, and with good reasons in health education when it is taught. I use this case study myself in my teaching about history of psychiatry at the university. But what is not widely known is that Cameron was also one of the medical experts who examined Nazi war criminals in Nuremberg in the first major trial of Nazi leaders at the International Military Tribunal. Indeed, Cameron wrote several papers about his experience as expert in Nuremberg. In his papers, he condemned German weakness on hysteria, but not Nazi experiments without consent. There were several trials in Nuremberg after World War II, including one trial against Nazi doctors who conducted experiments on Jewish and other prisoners in concentration camps. The process gave rise to the Nuremberg Code. To use that. Prohibiting and regulating medical ethics and patient consent. This means that Cameron began his experiments on patients at McGill during the Cold War, after the Nazi crime has been condemned, knowing the intentional rules of medical ethics known as Nuremberg Code. This aspect makes Cameron's actions all the more reprehensible. And again, when historians teach this case in the history of medicine, it makes students even more skeptical about what and how scholars can teach them. In the end, the risk is that historians would hide the complexity of history of medicine to the students, which is not the objective. Instead, I argue that the history of Nuremberg trials is more complex and should be taught without hiding the complexity of the American side, especially the role of corporate lawyers at Nuremberg. My aim here is not to excuse Cameron's crimes by talking about historical context. I, like the other historians, condemn Cameron's crimes. There is no ambiguity. But I would like to address the complexity of Nuremberg trials because the role of the American lawyers and medical experts were very complex and did not help Cameron to consider his crimes. The reason also why I'll further today about Nuremberg trials is also because the context today in France, in Germany, is far right and the European election. So the organization of International Military Tribunal at Nuremberg was subject to many political constraints. Historical analysis reveals certain little-known features of these political constraints as crimes against humanity were subordinated to the notions of conspiracy and war of aggression. The subordination of racist crimes to the concept of conspiracy was a response to the fear of creating a new universal criminal category that could be applied in the United States, where a racial order based on segregation prevailed, especially in the South of the United States. Why is this important to consider? African American publications were relatively quick to document anti-Jewish persecution in Germany after the Nazis took power in Germany, and to criticize the contradictions between US domestic and foreign policies, insofar that US laws imposing racial segregation lasted until 1965. This paradox is one of the major constraints that led to the specific Nuremberg Code. The American lawyers at Nuremberg include a large number of young lawyers from top law schools, as well as exiles who had fled Nazis and then the war in Europe, including specialists of international laws. But it was the corporate lawyers who dominated, and not the specialists of international laws. On the one hand, they were lawyers with academic legitimacy, in international law, but on the other, they were peripheral players, I mean the corporate lawyers, who gained centrality in this milieu by demonstrating inventiveness. For example, a Czechoslovak lawyer proposed that the preparation of war of aggression should be declared as crime and laid down the principle of the collective responsibility of members of certain Nazi organizations like SS, SA, Gestapo, etc. Translating into international law the criminal laws against criminal associations. Another example, in 1944, the New York business lawyer Maurice Bernays introduced the concept of conspiracy and criminal organization to describe Nazi crimes and genocide. The lawyers' ability to draw on this experience as elite lawyers and mobilize their professional network enable elite lawyers to advance practical solutions for trying Nazi criminals without going through international law. American corporate lawyers were outsiders who contributed their know-how as insiders of the American elite lawyers. But then we have to ask ourselves to what extent the Nuremberg Code was able to serve as a tool in the fight against domestic racism in the US. Indeed, it's a striking paradox that the Nuremberg Code drafted largely by lawyers in the American administration, condemned and punished the legal racism instituted by the Nazi regime, racism that was to be found in the United States, especially in the South. For instance, we owe the concept of genocide to Lithuanian Jewish lawyer Raphael Lemkin, a former prosecutor in Poland who became a professor at Duke University. But the same Lemkin lost interest in the African-American cause, which could be explained by his internalization of the norm specific of the East Coast academic elite. Of course, African-American and anti-racist activists followed the Nuremberg trials, but there were no African-American in the American delegation in Nuremberg. Moreover, the lawyers for the Nazi leaders also drew parallels between American racial laws and Nazi laws in Nuremberg. The rejection of a universal category of racist crimes could potentially have threatened American interest. This ultimately explains why racist crimes were subordinated to other crimes like conspiracy and war of aggression. So to conclude, African-American intellectuals and activists would in turn use corporate lawyers to fight for civil rights in the United States. A majority of civil rights lawyers in south of the United States in the 60s were Jewish, more than 50%. We can't understand that without taking into account the Holocaust and the Nuremberg trials. Sadly, this complex evolution had no clear impact in psychiatric experiment at McGill. Doctor who disagreed with Cameron left his department without recourse to the law. But family associations do it today. Thank you.